Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, it's going to be a simple one. There are certain things that have been introduced with the Runemaster patch that I believe are probably going to get nerfed. These things are probably going to get touched in some way in the patch notes, so if you are currently building around these for your Runemaster plans for 1.0, I would heavily suggest listening up, as odds are most of this will get touched or destroyed in some way or another. Now, if you enjoy videos like this, I would heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way of keeping up with news like this. Now, let's go in game and talk about certain things that will get changed slash nerfed. All right, so the first change slash nerf is probably going to be about Frostwall. Dread, what about Frostwall? Why is it so overpowered? Well, it's specifically because of one node, and that node is Prepared Wards. Prepared Wards allows you to gain infinite amounts of Flame Ward activations. So the idea with Flame Ward is it is a very high cooldown defensive ability. It is the hallmark of Sorcerer slash Spellblade slash Runemaster defensive layers, as it allows you to tank incoming hits while not having too much opportunity cost, as it provides you with a very large defensive layer without needing you to cast it, because you can just instant cast it whenever you need to. You can have multiple charges, up to 3 charges for free on your character, so that you can have multiple uses of it, and the cooldown isn't long enough for it to be absurd. And this is stronger than things like Rebuke, because Rebuke requires you to stand still while charging, and there's a lot of other things that are close to Flame Ward, but Flame Ward is nonetheless the best in the business. The reason why Sorcerer and Spellblade for so long did not have any access to too many defenses is because of the existence of Flame Ward, because as Perry realized and made Tunk change the entire EHP calculator because of Runemaster coming in, it turns out if you have Flame Ward up all the time, the amount of layers that you have of defense are absurd. And that's why Prepared Wards is probably going to get a nerf. Now, how would I nerf it if I put my game dev hat on? Now, of course, remember, I'm not actually a game dev. I don't necessarily know everything in the video game, but I have been playing it for the last 4 years. So what would I would do? Well, it would be very simple. I would just put a cooldown on Frostwall. If you want to use Frostwall as another charge, quote unquote, of Flame Ward, it needs to have an opportunity cost. You shouldn't be able to just simply put Frostwall on the ground, go through it, go through it again, go through it again, and get infinite amounts of Flame Wards. What you can do instead is have maybe like a 12-second cooldown on it, and then as you stack cooldown recovery speed, this on top of normal Flame Ward will stack with each other, and it will allow you to have massive defensive layers that require you to go through a few hoops, i.e., just put Flame Ward down and go through it. But it would require you to actually play the video game instead of just constantly putting, of course, Frostwall down. This would also completely change the playstyle of certain runic invocation builds as it currently stands, as of course there's like aspirants arrival, which is another node we'll talk about. But essentially the idea with most runic invocation builds like the plasma orb build and stuff like that, what would happen is you can simply, during your combo, you can put down Frostwall and then trigger Prepared Wards, and then also gain benefits of Aspirant's Arrival constantly without too much downsides to it. Meaning that either, of course, Prepared Ward probably needs to have a cooldown, making it so that for the Runic Invocation builds, it's no longer a I win button. Now, of course, there are other ways that you could do it. You can make it so that, Frostwall consumes Flame Ward charges for some reason. That's another way. I don't know. I don't think that'd be a good idea. But the current downside of the mana consumption is definitely not really a big deal for most builds that utilize this node. So definitely Prepared Wards is probably going to be one of the main things that gets nerfed in the next patch. So the next node we're going to be talking about is, of course, in Frostwall's tree. Again, it's going to be Aspirant's Arrival. So the idea with Aspirant's Arrival is if you make Frostwall, right, and you move through it, The next spell you cast of Runic Invocation or Glyph of Dominion is empowered with significantly more damage. Now, this is really, really strong as you can place down a Frostwall, juice up its duration, and get a skill that has like well over 200% more damage very easily. Now, my first complaint about this node is Frostwall is a just a mage skill, right? You can access it through any mage. So why is this specifically noting two skills that are Runemaster only? I would rather this just say the next spell cast has the more damage, as there is a lot of support for the big spell archetype, like for instance with stuff like Ice Barrage. There's stuff like Meteor, Black Hole, right? There's all these kinds of spells that could heavily benefit from this multiplier that currently can't because it's only Runic Invocation or Glyph of Dominion, that I'm kind of just sitting here puzzled by it. Now, what would I would do to nerf this node? As it currently stands, it's a little too strong, as it's too easy to place it down and get that much more damage for your next Runic Invocation, especially for the duration-based Runic Invocations, like for instance, Hydrahedron. To nerf this node, all you have to do is just cap it. I know I hate caps just like everyone else does, but legitimately, there would be no problem if this was capped at like 120% more damage. No one would care. It wouldn't be a problem because that is a acceptable amount of damage to get out of support skill. What I would do is I would make it work on any next spell cast to make it a lot more flavorable for, of course, mage in general, and also add a cap to it so you can't be absurd with it and get ridiculous amounts of more damage. I would say 4 to 5 seconds worth of charging up is plenty. You shouldn't need more than that. Anything more than that is just absurd. So this node, I'm hoping, will get changed and to become a much better tool for mage in general, so we can play those meteor builds and not feel terrible. I don't know why this doesn't just make it work with any mage spell, to be honest. All right, so the next node that we're going to be talking about is Edict of the Scion. So Edict of the Scion, it gives you a decent amount of area for area skills, which is a very cool part of the node. And the next part, it also gives you ward per rune on area skill use. This node seems very, lackluster at first until you start doing some math. If you have all 6 points in it, you get 36 ward per rune on area skill use, which is about 108 ward on skill use. Now, this is on top of course, the arcane focus, which gives you 40. So you can just get a generic 140 ward on skill use very easily with not too much investment, especially if you are a rune master. And this is where it kind of starts going crazy, right? There are a lot of spammable area skills as a mage in general, right? Uh, and another problem that I have with this node, of course, it's on the lower half of Runemaster. Now, of course, it's cool that it is, thanks to the area affix on it. But this is kind of something that you would assume would be the end node of Runemaster. So, like for instance, this should be the benefit for being a Runemaster, at least the ward per area on area skill use. What I would rather this read is just like a generic 30 ward on area skill use, just in general, right, as a threshold for getting this node up to a certain point, and then taking this effect and putting it at the top of Runemaster instead of a different node that we currently have. And I think that would be a lot more balanced than it just being so easily accessible in general as a Runemaster. Because I think that this should be a reward for being a Runemaster, not just like, oh, I'm a Runemaster, I have this. Another problem that it has is it kind of promotes you to play builds that never actually use your Runic Invocation and simply just leave it on your bar. And I don't necessarily like that. I would rather it be you use Runic Invocation or you don't use it. It's weird to have incentivization to never press the button, as if you do, you lose all that ward per rune on area skill use, right? But essentially, there are not many skills and abilities in general that can give you well over like 100 ward on skill use. There's a few like Twisted Heart or something like that that can get close or decently there, but those are all things that require investment. Well, this is just in the passive tree. I think the way that this should work is it should like maybe scale off of intelligence or something like that. So for instance, you gain like maybe like zero point 0.3 ward per intelligence per rune use or something like that. See, like something of the like. I'm not necessarily correct on the math there, but the idea is right out of the gate, it's just being able to be used and it's very strong because of that. Now, of course, we'll see if they change it. And it's definitely going to be one of the staples of most mage builds in general that aren't Spellblade in the future if it doesn't get changed. All right, so the next node is going to be a little controversial, but I am going to bring it up. I believe freezing point to be just a little bit overpowered. What do I mean by that? Well, right now, you can turn your armor shred generic, right, into frostbite chance for cold spells. This turns out to be very, very good. I don't know if you know, but turns out you can get well over 800% chance to shred armor on hit. And if you combine that with the albeit unique base nature of frostbite, you can kind of start going places, especially if you use something like Frostclaw per se, or I'll be honest, any skill that's a cold spell, you can use this with anything, and it ends up becoming very strong. I think a 1-to-1 ratio is too favorable as it currently stands, as Armor Shred is very easily stackable. I like the existence of this effect. I want this to exist. I like it to exist. I think it's really cool. I think it's very strong. I like it. But I think as it currently stands right now, a 1-to-1 conversion is a little bit absurd. Now, of course, we could talk about the numbers. It could be 50% of your armor shred. That would still be an enormous amount of frostbite chance, by the way. Be like 400% easily, right? Or it could maybe be 70%, 75%. I think that's a good middle ground of it still being very strong and build aroundable for frostbite builds, but it would not be so absurd and over the top that it would make every frostbite build known to man very strong on mage in general. I think just a little bit of love tap. The idea here, anyways, the reason why nerfing these things in small amounts is better than nerfing it in a big amount is when we nerf something like freezing point to bring it to like 70% of its value, the idea is to leave future design room for other things. Now, right now, freezing point might not be that strong. Like it might be insanely strong, but might not be absurdly broken strong, right? But the problem is, as they add more things that synergize with Frostbite, more uniques that synergize with Frostbite, and as builds get more refined, this node will get more absurd and more absurd. So I would rather them nerf it now and us get used to it than them have to do a giga nerf later for it to, be destroyed in the future, because odds are this node, if it stays the way it is in the current state of the video game, right, in the future, it might just be deleted. It might just end up being deleted. Even with all of this investment, all of this effort, having just generic armor shred chance be turned into frostbite chance is a very powerful node. Now, of course, we'll see what happens, but I really do think that this is very strong and needs just a little bit of a love tap. Even like 80% would be reasonable, right? I think right now you can get a very large amount of armor shred. So like just nerfing this just by a tidbit would be great. Now, hopefully that remains to be the case. All right, so the next few things we're going to talk about, of course, rely upon Jagged Veil. Jagged Veil is a node that gives you 10 ward on crit and gives you up to 20% more critical strike multiplier on bosses and rares. Turns out, when you have a class that can promote a very large amount of hits and you give them a way of benefiting from that multiple ways, that's going to be very strong. So having 10 ward on crit sounds not very strong until you realize some of these builds that we're playing can end up with like 60 hits and crits on the dummy, which then is like 600 ward per second in this regard. And that is competitive with almost every single kind of unique to generate ward in the entire game. So yeah, ward on crit might be a little busted. I have a few solutions for it. Of course, the first thing you can do is you can make it 5 ward on crit. That would be fine, but then it wouldn't really be worthy of being at the top of Runemaster because Perry and I believe in the same opinion here that the top nodes of each mastery should be what the mastery is, what it's based around. And I think instead of Jagged Veil being up here, I think it should be down below where Edict of the Scion is, albeit in a nerf state, probably like 4 or 5 ward on crit and maybe 10% more damage. And then Edict of the Scion's effect, where you gain ward per rune on area skill use, should be at the top. Edict of the Scion should be the benefit for being, of course, a Runemaster, while Jagged Veil should be just kind of like a side thing, like maybe 4 ward on crit. I don't know. Like, I'll be honest, we're playing with really big numbers as long as Frostclaw exists in the game, which will be something we'll be talking about very soon. Now, of course, I think that's the last of the specific Runemaster things that should get changed, in my opinion. Of course, there's like a lot of problems with runic invocation that I won't get even into, mainly because of the balance of the skill in general, on top of all of the bugs. It makes it very hard to make any judgments about the skill in general, so we will have to wait for 1.0 till they bug fix most things, and then we can talk about that in a future state. So the rest of this video is going to be, of course, we're going to talk about Frostclaw. All right, we're going to talk about Frostclaw. Okay, the last thing we're going to be talking about in this video is Frostclaw. Now, of course, Frostclaw is not a specific Runemaster thing, but there's a lot of Frostclaw Runemasters out there. Now, I love the skill. Harry loves this skill. Almost the entire community when it was released. Everyone loves Frostclaw, okay? When I say this. But I think that something needs to be changed just a little bit. Just a little bit. I think Frostclaw is a very cool skill, as it's a skill with very little more damage multipliers in it, while also still being competitive in endgame, right? But there are some things in it that need to change, in my humble opinion, in the future. The first being, of course, the ailment cleanse on cast. You don't know, Frostclaw can cleanse up to 3 ailments on cast. The reason why this is so strong is it's cleansed the whole stack of ailment. So, for instance, if you have 20 stacks of poison on you and you cast Bright Frost, right, even though it only cleanses 3 ailments, it will cleanse the entire stack. There is no reason for this. There's no given reason for this. There's no reason it should work like this. If you have 20 stacks of poison, you have 3 points in Bright Frost, you should literally only cleanse 3 of those ailments. It should not be all of them at once. Or you can have a chance to cleanse all ailments on you percentage wise. So, like for instance, each node would give you a 10% chance when you cast Frostclaw to cleanse all ailments on top of you. This 3 ailments cleanse on cast thing is just so awkward, and it just makes no sense in the rest of the game, considering like how all the other cleanses work. It's either one or done. It's never just all of it, right? Never just like pieces of it. It's very confusing. I would rather just be a generic 30% chance to cleanse stuff on you. I would be fine with that, to be a little RNG, so you wouldn't be 100% chance to always cleanse on you, so you might have to deal with the downside of negative ailments on you. But overall, I think Bright Frost needs a little bit of a change, just in general, to make it more like in line with the rest of the things in the video game, right? Now, the next thing, of course, Frostclaw needs to get changed is Volley of Glass. Now, Volley of Glass itself is not overpowered. I think it's a very fair node. You have to spend a bunch of mana to use it. You have to spend most of Frostclaw's tree dealing with the downsides of this node with the mana cost. But the biggest problem, of course, is it is currently bugged. So if you take Volley of Glass, it technically takes the area tag off of Frostclaw, because normally Frostclaw is 3 projectiles and an area hit, but the projectiles and area can only hit once. That's the balance of that, right? Now, of course, when you take, where is it? Volley of Glass, when you take Volley of Glass, it takes out that area component, right? And no more explosion, right? It no longer creates the burst damage of the target. So this should remove the area tag. But right now, as it currently stands, if you take off the area node, it still works with Edict of the Scion, as we talked about earlier. So you can get the Volley of Glass upgrade while still benefiting fully from Edict of the Scion, even though it isn't technically an area skill anymore, thanks to Volley of Glass. So I think that, of course, they should just fix the bug, and in theory, it should be fine. I think Frostclaw is standing on that weird ledge where it's really fun, right? And everyone enjoys it, and we don't want it to see it bad. We don't want it to be another Acid Flask. We don't want it to be another Tempest Strike. We want Frostclaw to remain playable throughout the history of Last Epoch, as it is one of the most entertaining skills that have ever been added ever, right? But I think if this was fixed, it would feel a lot less overpowered as it currently stands. This is more of a bug than an actual, balance thing, but it still remains to be said. But otherwise, I think if all of these changes were changed, if the Frostbite node was changed, if the Ward on Crit node was changed, if Edict to Scion is changed, all these nodes were changed, I think Frostclaw wouldn't have to be changed, which, hallelujah, as it is such a fun skill. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. Bye.